people are allowed to, touch the Eucharist are if they're picking it off the floor. And a lot of this, again, even that was kind of written before the Rituale today, which kind of tells you how to, take care of accidents like that. He said that, or if you're trying to stop desecration from taking place. And so I'm thinking, especially in his context, and this still happens today, like witches and stuff going into parishes, right? And they would just try to receive or steal stuff from the tabernacle, etc. But those penances, though, back then, even for like small, what we would consider small Eucharistic like accidents, would be severe. So just as an example, if a drop of the precious blood was to land on the altar veil, right? Depending on how far it sunk down to which of the altar cloths, the priest would have to do up to 40 to 80 days of penance. So think of basically like a Lent or 2 Lents based off of that. Like that's how serious the church treated the blood of Christ. And now it's just like, hey,
nowadays the church promotes sacrilege far worse than that.
Yeah, exactly.
It reminds me of the scene in Vikings when the first time they go in and they go into the Catholic Mass, and the Vikings, like, they take the blood from the priest and like he takes a sip of it and he spits it out, and the whole crowd is horrified. Right. And it's horrible. Almost like we're so desensitized now. I don't think people would even think that was a big deal now, but they did show. Yeah, it was Floki. They did show how, like, they were so horrified that they would desecrate the blood of Christ like that in that show. I only thought of that because I just watched that episode recently.
Dang, I've never seen it. I've only heard people like meme and say, and tell me if this is true or not, like that there's black Vikings.
No.
I've heard someone say that, or maybe it was like a proposal back in the day. But they were talking about. I mean, we'll discuss it. Maybe we want to lead into this, but like all the DEI stuff.
Yeah, so that's our next topic. So go ahead.
DEI and entertainment. It's just so it's destroyed, entertainment. And so you would hear people talk about stuff like, yeah, can we have like, a black king of England in the 13th century and make a TV show out of that? And you're just like, okay, well,
you saw Netflix was doing that. They did with Cleopatra. They made Cleopatra black, things like that.
What are you guys doing? Goodness gracious.
But Vikings could have been a great show if it was written from the perspective of the Catholics that converted them.
Yeah.
Like that's where all of these shows fall apart, right? So like,
and
if you're showing
what's his name, Athelstan, the priest, had a little bit more backbone.
Dude, he doesn't even like within he winds up within.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't even attempt to convert the Vikings that kidnap him. He just like goes along and just becomes Viking. And it's like
he's a modern priest.
Yeah, it's just so unbelievable. Like he's holding he's keeping the Bibles, he's trying to keep it safe because it's so sacred to him. But then he just throws out these generic Bible lines when they're like sacrificing humans and stuff. He's just like, well, the Bible says there's a time to pray and a time to be sad. And I was like, what? Are you kidding me? This is ridiculous. This is not what any medieval monk would be saying in this situation,
I feel like, I feel like Hollywood does one of two things when it comes to priests or monks and nuns, right? They're either like these milksops over here, or like basically like adulterers or perverts or whatever, right? Yeah. Just something in that category, broadly speaking. Or on the other extreme, they're like, this is the good extreme, like they're just like the epic boss exorcist priest who goes in there and just takes names and does etc., right? But rarely do you see, I would say, like a good accurate portrayal. So I'm thinking briefly, it's like a very brief scene, but you guys have had him on the show, Mel Gibson, right? In Braveheart, do you remember in like the first major battle, there's like that quick 3-4 second scene where the monks are dragging like the wounded off the battlefield and stuff like that?
Oh, I never picked up on that.
Yeah, so monks would do that, or think of Saving Private Ryan, right? Like the priest who's out there doing last rites and stuff like that. Those are epic priests. Where did they start marrying women? Like, where did that start coming down?
You know what show did a good portrayal of that was the Pacific. So, or not the Pacific, it was what's the other one?
Band of Brothers.
Band of Brothers was, which one was? Band of Brothers was Catholic. The Pacific was Protestant.
Oh, so
Band of Brothers was like the Northeast
It was the
They
Irish
had,
and
like,
Italian.
it was the
from New
Irish and
York.
Italians from the Northeast, from like, Philly and New York and all that, where the Pacific was the Midwest, and it took these kids from like Indiana and stuff like that. So you had in Band of Brothers, like you had priests on the battlefield saying mass on the hood of a Jeep and things like that. It's actually a pretty interesting, because I watched that show like once every 2 or 3 years. Back to back, I'll watch Band of Brothers and then the Pacific, and I always pick up on the contrast.
Have you watched the new one?
No.
Masters of the Air. It's made by the same producers.
Is it any good?
Well, I haven't watched it yet. It's about the bombing campaigns over Europe.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it was going to be any good. I saw it's on Apple TV, I think, right?
I'm not sure.
So if it's like in the era though that they're making of like what we're talking about DEI, is there at least like a trans woman pilot who's disabled?
Well, okay, so let's jump into that topic, because I think this June is going to be the final Pride Month. Not that it'll be the final one, but I think last year they killed it, and I think
they went too far. Yeah,
they went too far, right? So we just saw an article came out that Target is getting rid of DEI. Not DEI. They're getting rid of their pride displays. They're getting rid of some of their pride displays in some of the stores. So I would guess they're still going to keep them in New York and California and, the big Democrat, the big cities and stuff, because people are so desensitized there. But I think more when you get into like the Midwest and things like that, you're not going to see any more of this stuff. So you had, let's pull that story.
I have the
Target. Okay, so Target, hang on, let's see. Okay, so Target confirmed Friday that it won't carry Pride Month merchandise at all stores in June after the discount retailer experienced a backlash and lower sales over its collection honoring the rainbow community. Target, which operates roughly 2,000 stores, said decisions about where to stock Pride-themed products, including adult apparel, home goods, food, and beverages, would be based on guest insights and consumer research. A Target spokesperson declined to disclose the number of stores where the merchandise will not be available. The company said its online shop would offer a full assortment. The moves were first reported by Bloomberg. Like last year, this thing went ballistic, right? So it really started with the Bud Light campaign with Dylan Mulvaney. Like, I really think Dylan Mulvaney killed Pride.
He did. I think he did.
He really did. He killed the rainbow movement. Like, people are just fed up with it. And once they saw they got some traction with Bud Light, that's the Target thing happened after that, and people really just came down on Target. And I really think people need to have a rule where if you see a rainbow near anything, you need to turn around and walk out of the store and go get that product somewhere else.
Oh, yeah, because nowadays that you can find so much on the web from like alternate economy that you can find like most of what you're wanting to look for.
Yeah,
and it's pretty epic. But yeah, I think you're right. I think he did kill it, because do you guys remember last year it wasn't as reported as the Bud Light stuff, but it was still fairly reported that Target was like, a lot of their products had like the satanic goat of Baphomet on it, and it was made, a lot of the designs were by Satanists and stuff like that. They were reported pretty widely in conservative media, but in their sections, like Target's always had, essentially since the Pride thing's been around, like a Pride section, but it was really last year they put it in the kids section, and they had those swimsuits for the trannies, and then they also had, you can look it up, these satanic goat of Baphomet shirts that would say Satan loves Pride, and they were selling these at their store. And I was like, well, thank you for coming out of the woodwork, and being honest for what we've been saying forever. And that caused a big ruckus, to say the least. And so you gotta be smart. Like, that's the thing. Like, if you're trying to cater to this small percentage of the community, though, like increasing in my generation, it just doesn't work. People just don't want to be bombarded with 24/7. It's like 136 days now in the US calendar are devoted somehow to like the rainbow movement, whereas like veterans get like 2 or 3.
Yeah.
So it's ridiculous.
So, well, we were talking about this around the time I gave my talk, because just talking about the new religion that's popping up, it's actually pretty funny. I had my everybody over for Mother's Day. My in-laws came over and stuff, and we were in my backyard, and I was showing my in-laws my pond in the backyard with my Marian shrine back there. My brother-in-law was like, "What do you like? Come back here and pray?" I'm like, Yeah, that's like
Yeah.
exactly what I do. I'm like, yes, I sit on that chair and I pray a rosary right here. But we got into a conversation just talking about how all these religious thing, and I kind of went into my whole spiel that I gave at my talk and just talking about how, you know, they got rid of Christianity, but look at what's replaced it. Like, there's no longer the crucifix. We ripped the crucifix down and now a rainbow flag replaced it. And I kind of took them through like the liturgy of the rainbow movement, you know, the George Floyd halo and the white people kissing the feet during that whole thing. And I kind of took
Our
them through the whole
bishops kneeling.
yeah, so many
Yeah,
different things that and the holy days of obligation was something I tried to point out. I'm like, look, you have to understand all the holidays that we think are just these secular holidays. I mean, Valentine's Day, Halloween, all these things. Yeah, you know, what do you
When he
I
asked
should
about
have said
praying
that.
in the chair.
I should have said that. Yeah, you don't. What are you, gay?
So true. So
but
true.
when I took them through that and just showing, you know, all the holidays, you know, Christmas, Easter, Valentine's Day, Halloween, all these holidays that used to be actual holy days. These were our Christian holy days that became these secular things that we do, have been replaced now by, I think there's 100 and something different days that we celebrate. You know, we have Black History Month. Now they want to do Jewish History Month. And now they want anything but something to do with Christianity. Like, and it really, I think it resonated a little bit with them, you know, and then I kind of went into
really need Jewish History Month when they tell you every chance they get how often they've been oppressed.
Well, you'll find everybody gets a history month except for white straight men, right? That's the one.
But Catholics specifically have lost all of our cultural influence when it comes to this stuff. So all right. So leading into the next story, you have last week or the week before, you saw all these college campus protests, right? Now, UNC had that one where you had the frat boys where like they were mocking the like they were doing the monkey thing and everything. Like those kids got in trouble for doing that. But that school, UNC, and there's several different colleges doing it. So UNC Chapel Hill trustees moved to divert diversity program funds to police. Like they defunded DEI and funded police. This is the defund the police movement. Oh man, let me see. I think I got it on there we go. I think I got it on a paid site. So UNC Chapel Hill. No, it's on a paid site. I gotta find it on a different one.
UNC Chapel Hill, though, that was the hill with the frat dudes who were holding up the flag, right?
Yeah.
From being desecrated. Yeah, those guys were chads.
All right, so UNC Chapel Hill Board of Trustees voted to, you see, it's gonna be okay. Voted to divert millions of dollars spent on diversity, equity, and inclusion programs into public safety instead, ahead of an expected policy change statewide to restrict DEI. At a special meeting Monday morning, the board unanimously moved to reallocate the $2.3 million that the university spends on DEI programs toward police and other public safety measures as part of its annual budget approval process. The university's operating budget totaled more than $4 billion in the wow.
Dang.
University had a $4 billion.
Really?
Oh, great, Rob. Just show us all this.
It's your site.
They have a $4 billion budget.
That's just their operating budget too. That's not like an endowment.
Is that like the whole university?
Okay,
Man, why is
this site's gotta go? Yeah, dude,
so
that's how does a college have a $4 billion operating?
That's not even a. That's like just your average college.
$4 billion a year for an operating budget. That seems insane to me. What could they possibly? I guess like the campus. I don't know. That is
so like
crazy to me.
The University of Minnesota's annual operating budget in 2020, $4.2 billion.
That's nuts.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of people say that like those guys were like there to support the state of Israel. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. It's like I say this all the time on my show and on my social media outlets. I don't really care so much who you support in this conflict because I'm an American. I'm just like, let's just stay out of it. But the one thing I was at least happy with these dudes, and we can debate it if you want, but like, was that at least they were like keeping the flag up from off the ground. I don't really care who you are.
But either way, it goes to show you that there's a line that Because when you saw during 2020, you had let's just say those who would typically support Israel were behind the Black Lives Matter movement, right?
Oh yeah.
Those who would typically support the, Zionist causes were behind all of that stuff. And I think now they kind of
At the same time, though, those who supported Palestine were also behind that.
Right. But I think the typical liberal Jewish person thought they were on the same side as your everyday liberal. And now that they're seeing the monster that has been created, they're like, whoa, chill out. We're going to end this stuff now. Because they see the monster that this thing is. This is I see on the right a lot of people take the Nick Fuentes route and go and attack Israel that way, right? But at the same time, you don't want to jump on the same, like the kids protesting at colleges, supporting Hamas and stuff. Like they're insane, those people.
That's the thing. Like, I mean, again, I'm not justifying everything that the frat dudes were doing, but what I am saying is like a lot of those students were anti-American activists who were very much so funded by George Soros and would have loved nothing more to rip down Old Glory and burn it. You can call me like a, Bible thumping American lover. But it's just like, I mean, at least I have the virtue of patriotism, which is right up next to religion and filial piety to your family. If we're all Catholics here, patriotism is one of the top 3 big virtues on a natural level. But it's just like those.
Nick is gonna die hard. It's like it doesn't want to go the wasp in you, bud.
No, it's just like it's just like my family's done a lot for the United States, and I'll do whatever I can for the United States. But it's like, it's like I'm not justifying what they did, but you're right. I think the big disconnect in the left, because you see them schisming pretty hardcore right now, and I'm actually happy that they are, because I think it's going to help us win this next election, is older Dems, right, are kind of part of that broader pro-State of Israel group, mostly because, they're closer in proximity to 1948, right? Even if they're in the boomer age, they're still closer in proximity. Whereas the younger, particularly if you're in a minority group, particularly African Americans, are very much so anti-State of Israel. Right. And so you're seeing this schism to where a lot of these liberal commentators who have been, like, say, bashing Trump for the last 7 years are now singing a very different tune because they're very confused. And what's hilarious is that these are the same people who for years have been like, it's going to be the youth that's going to help transform the United States. And now they're like, why is the youth so, unhinged? I don't understand.
Nick, there's something so real about what you're saying right now. So you see it even in my Catholic friends, right? So I kind of find myself in I think Jack Posobiec tweeted this out today, talking about he was calling us centennials, those born between 81 and 90. So if you're born 81 and 90, they call them zillennials, or he's calling us centennials. We're like the last of the analog age before the digital fully kicks in, right?
Yeah.
So
we still remember cassettes, barely.
Yeah, exactly. So my generation, I'm kind of like caught right in between. So if you look at guys like Gavin Ashenden and the older Catholics, you can see they're very pro-Israel. Even a guy like, we're going to talk about Jordan Peterson. I think guys in that older age bracket are very pro-Israel because the propaganda after World War II was so heavy. I mean, you had movies like Schindler's List coming out. You had Sophie's Choice coming out. You had all of this. And I'm not saying propaganda is bad even. I'm just saying after World War II, you had this push to really make sure everybody knew the atrocities that happened during World War II. Now, growing up, I still saw some of that, right? And now, because I'm kind of caught in this in-between phase, like I'll throw some jabs at Israel, but I'm also still a little hesitant because I still, I grew up learning about the atrocities of that whole thing. But then you see this younger generation is just so adamantly anti-State of Israel, like it really is an age thing that I'm seeing, and I'm kind of caught in the middle of it. It's a strange thing to witness on all sides.
Yeah, no, it is weird. And I think you do see like this also in the world of the right, like the right wing, but I think the right wing's discussion is not so much like pro versus anti-Israel for the most part. I think it's mostly based around the question of just like how much should we be involved?
Yeah,
Because it's like this. Yes. Does the
100%
Holy
pro.
Land belong to the Catholic Church? Yes, it does. Right. All the holy sites are there in the time of our Lord, and in Nick's perfect world, right, the Kingdom of Jerusalem would still be around, and it'd be epic, etc. But like, and so therefore, when you read a lot of these quotations, like particularly by Pius X, and they're asking questions like, do the Jews deserve their own chosen land? Right, and he's saying no. Right, we should be there baptizing, etc., etc. Right, I agree with all this. Now, post 1948, what do? Right? You have all these millions of people move in. There's millions and millions more. And now several generations later, right? I don't even know how many generations it would be since 1948, but at least 4 or 5, right? You have an established culture there. So what do? Do you move them all out? Like, where do they all go? Do you want to come to the United States and live in the deep South? Do you want them to live all in New York? Like, where do you want them to live? Or you want them to go back to Poland? Like, a lot of them were born there. So what do? My thought is it's just like, all right, the state of Israel does a lot of wrong because every society does a lot of wrong.
Yeah,
I'm sure it does some right because a lot of societies do a lot of
I mean
right.
they're no worse than the state of America.
Yeah, I mean, I would just like I have no attachment to them on a religious basis anymore. I used to because like way back in
Yeah,
the day I was an evangelical dispensationalist, but to the way I look at it now is it's just like, look, if they want to do their thing, they do their thing, but let us not be involved. That's my old school isolationistic America first policy of just let's focus in on America.
It was hard.
You know,
It was hard.
that's funny.
I had to
I'm
dig
just
through
like
your wife's Facebook.
my point is just like let's just stay out of the conflict. I think criticisms are fine, but my issue is whenever I see a lot of Catholics who actually go so far in their criticism where they're like, you know what, maybe Hamas is based. I'm just like, are you insane? Like, it's two
yeah,
antichrist religions duking it out. Why should we pick sides? Why don't we pray for peace and have our tax dollars here in the United States?
yeah. I care about the Palestinian Christians.
Yeah, and I care about the
Mhm.
Jewish Christian. I care about all Christians. I'm like, I don't care what side of that border you're on. Like,
But
it's
to be
horrible.
fair, it's very hard to become an Israeli citizen as a Christian.
Yeah, for sure.
Far
For
harder
sure.
than a Palestinian.
For sure. Yeah. My point is, it's just like, you have two religions that don't profess Christ, right? Duking it out over there. Why should we be involved?
Yeah, this is one of those topics. I wrote something the other day. I said, no matter what you do, somebody will accuse you of being cringe. And it's because it's funny, Nick, the conversation me and you had the other day about discussing Pearl and Trent.
Mm-hmm.
I had a barrage of people, half of them coming in saying I was too soft on it and I didn't go hard enough, and the other half coming in saying I was a misogynist and all this. It's like,
And me on the outside, just glad I wasn't involved.
Rob's like, I was
more-
happy I was fishing.
I caught more grief on Twitter than I did on YouTube because I think I explained myself better on YouTube. But it goes to the same thing with this topic as it does kind of with the men's attitude towards women thing, where
Yeah.
I think I'm very influenced by the younger guys. Where if you look towards the older generation, they were very saturated in feminism. And I'm kind of caught in the middle. And then this younger generation is just so anti-feminist. They just like hate women in general. And I'm kind of in this like in-between phase where I'm like, all right, guys, you got to settle down a little bit there,
That's
It
the
all
issue.
depends
Like
on
what the specific is.
On if your wife's asked you to hang something that day or not.
Oh yeah.
That's so funny. I just try to look at things. I can genuinely say this. I'm trying to look at things through the lens of what would Christ want, right? And we know that war is a sin, right? Outside of like a just war context, like war is a sin. And Christ does talk about blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of peace. And he talks about praying for your enemies, etc. And I see way more Catholics online like duking this out in a conflict that I don't even think we should be involved in, rather than being like, are you praying for peace? Like, genuine question to the audience. It's like, are you praying the rosary every day? So as Our Lady of Fatima said, we just celebrated our feast day yesterday, that it can establish world peace in the world. Or are we spending more time just being like, how red-pilled can I get? Because trust me, here's the thing. Your kids are going to be red-pilled, but maybe potentially in another way if you go too far.
Well,
Yeah,
also
it's always
you have to think. Well, first off, Monica has to address this. No, I'm absolutely not an Andrew Tate fan. Like not at all in any way. I do think, like me and Nick discussed, I think that when people are debating Pearl, they don't concede enough to her valid points. She
Yeah.
makes a lot of valid points about how awful a lot of modern women can be. Doesn't mean all women. It means modern women can be very awful. But I don't even want to get into that. But